I want to tell you a story about someone working with a tech startup. Her name is Maria. Maria started a few months ago as a freelancer at an Uber-inspired company. She has access to more clients than she's ever had before, and she's able to leverage the company's technology and tools. However, the gigs are inconsistent, and the pay is lower than what she made when she booked the work on her own. One of her last customers complained through the app, and she lost access to leads for 4 days. Not one phone call or message before she was cut off. Maria's job didn't come with a contract or any guarantee of work, but the salary was decent. She knew she was worth more, but her last job had a relentless schedule, and she appreciated the flexibility to schedule around her son's birthday or her mom's doctor's appointments. But after the first couple of months, she began to worry. The hours and pay became unpredictable. Sometimes Maria would complete a project, she'd log into her portal, and inexplicably her rate had dropped. Maria is working for one of Silicon Valley's hottest tech startups, but she's not a coder or a graphic designer. She's a domestic worker who cleans houses, and she does so through a new on-demand cleaning app. Maria isn't paid hundreds of dollars an hour or even $50 an hour, but barely $15 an hour. That is when she's paid at all. Maria joined this promising startup for the same reasons many of us do. She was hopeful that this new company would improve her chances of finding better work in an economy that's become very unforgiving. When I first heard Maria's story, I was struck by how sadly familiar it all felt. As the Social Innovations Director at the National Domestic Workers Alliance, I hear such reports often. Pay insecurity, working without contracts, inconsistent hours, and stolen wages. These are common problems in the low-wage worker movement. On the one hand, it's easy to dismiss this as the same inequality faced offline, simply moving online. It's very likely that without a serious intervention, technology will simply codify at a greater scale and pace than we've ever seen before. However, I'm here today to articulate a different, a more optimistic vision, one that believes that the creative collision of business and social movements, that the togetherness of tech and labor is the only sustainable way forward for all of us. I'm here to invite you to imagine how we can reshape the future of work together in very fundamental, humane, and kind ways. Work, as we know it, is changing. We can no longer rely on past assumptions about our jobs. Today, the promise of a 40-hour work week and a job where you can retire in dignity with good health insurance and a pension is quickly becoming a relic of the past. Today, the majority of Americans are working harder and harder, longer than ever, but for less and less pay. And today, with the advent of the on-demand economy, many people simply never clock out. Many who have to work 2 or 3 jobs to barely make ends meet, while those of us who have more lucrative jobs are always expected to be working. Yet, none of this is inevitable. All that separates inequality from opportunity, anxiety from security, feeling discarded to feeling valued, are the choices we make, the businesses we build, and the way we code. Social movements plus technology can be the great equalizer. Together, we can do what politicians have failed to do, what laws have been unable to accomplish in practice. We just have to decide to make it so. As the entire world migrates onto the internet, where all of our businesses and jobs and human interactions are increasingly digitized, on the one hand, workers like Maria are latecomers to this trend, just now working with tech startups after years of traditional cleaning employment directly with clients. Yet what we all need to realize, and what you all need to realize, is that in another more profound way, where domestic workers have been is where the future of work is going. As our entire economy becomes increasingly based on temporary freelance labor, the abuses like workers like Maria have faced for decades foreshadow the dangers ahead for all of us. To understand this connection, let me give you a window into an invisible world, an undervalued world, a world in the shadow for generations that technology is rapidly disrupting and dramatically changing. And one that, if we pull back the curtain, can shed light on where the future of work may be going and what we can do together to make it one where we're incubating opportunity instead of accelerating inequality. The National Domestic Workers Alliance is the leading voice for the nation's 3 million domestic workers, the women who work as nannies, cleaners, housekeepers, caregivers for the elderly. The single unifying factor about this workforce, which is more than 90% women, is that when they go to work, it's in the privacy of someone else's home. They are the women who comfort the colicky baby and diffuse the panic attack of a disoriented grandparent. They are nurse, therapist, cook, and companion, all at the same time, yet they're often told what they do is not real work. And while domestic work in this country dates back to slavery, today about half of domestic workers in this country are immigrants, many of whom are undocumented. Domestic work is a gray market. It's a word-of-mouth market. It's mostly informal and cash-based, with almost a quarter of workers earning less than minimum wages. And since the 1930s, they've been generally excluded from any foundational labor law protections that this country takes for granted, including the right to a weekend, minimum wage, overtime, and the ability to form a union. There are two major trends affecting the domestic care sector, causing us to branch out from our bread and butter strategies of organizing and legislative advocacy and base building. First, demand for care is skyrocketing. More women are entering the workforce, either by choice or more likely by necessity. The baby boomers are aging. 10,000 people are turning 65 every day. And the overwhelming preference of that generation, our grandparents, and soon our parents, is to age with dignity in their homes. This means huge care markets are emerging. Biomedical device companies, tech companies, housing developers, they're all preparing for this monumental demographic change in demand. The second trend is Silicon Valley and tech are changing the future of care jobs. We have seen the collision of technology and the service economy radically disrupt how people hire taxis, rent cars, complete errands, and the care markets are next. Online marketplaces are making it easier to find care, and much of the momentum and excitement is tied to tech capital imagining the Uber of babysitting and the Uber of house cleaning. Tech's entrance into our sector is aggregating labor in ways we've never seen before. The way domestic work is arranged, mediated, distributed, and paid for is rapidly changing. But as we saw in Maria's story, there is no guarantee that the business of care will be a caring business. So the real question is, what do we want to do? And how do we make it happen? Let's be honest. Until recently, the biggest advance in childcare and technology was creating a website to advertise your services, and maybe, just maybe, a nanny had her own Facebook page. Left to our own devices, it's probably true labor activists would not unilaterally come up with the slickest mobile app to coordinate their services with you. However, on the flip side, what does a care economy solely driven by technology look like? How will app builders code for an industry that's essentially about human relations? Who cares for the caregivers? I believe it's naive to think that social movements can dictate technology. And I think it will be dangerous to have business define care. The truth is, social movements and business are indeed an odd couple. One could argue that the two couldn't be further apart from each other in terms of skill sets, personality traits, and priorities. But it's almost because of these inherent differences that the gains tied to any joint endeavor could be so great. That's why we've launched Fair Care Labs. I realize that we, as a social movement, would need to create the space to disrupt ourselves and reinvent our vision for social change. As the innovation arm of the domestic worker movement, Fair Care Labs is meant to be the home for creative collisions in our space, bringing together nannies and coders, cleaners and social entrepreneurs, activists and hackers. We provide the shared mission and guiding principles for groups to come together and then let the sparks fly. For example, We're charting new ground with industry players like Care.com. Together, we're envisioning how social psychology and behavioral economics can nudge fair employment standards in an online marketplace of 12 million users. We see values where others don't, and that leads to novel and essential design insights that come directly from the workers. We're building the market and the means to better manage the relationship between workers and employers. And we launched Care Tango, our movement's first fair care business. This isn't about optimizing user testing. This is about understanding trade-offs and constantly asking ourselves, whose problems is the market solving? And are we solving more problems than we're creating? This isn't about, code is powerful. In an industry impossible to regulate such as ours, it may have greater impact than the laws we've changed. And it doesn't take an act of Congress or a multi-stakeholder coalition or years of persuading. It can be done starting with a few keystrokes. It doesn't require government action or grand proclamations. All it takes is a mindful approach. The full-on collision between business, tech, and social movements can either result in chaos or creativity. We're stretching into this new world, reaching out to bridge the gap between what's worked before and what will work in the future, to make the link between efficiency and equity, to transform the future of work. Domestic work is just one area where we can look for how this is happening. But as a canary in the coal mine, it's a sector that signals what lies ahead. If we do this right, we can help make tech-driven labor and the labor behind tech more fair and just for all of us. I hope you'll join us or collide with us in this endeavor.